bar. This is a PM growth series. The idea is how can we shorten the learning cycles by having people that have been there, done that, share their learning, share their stories. Hopefully, folks that are starting to scale up in their own careers in the product management space can learn from them, and hopefully some of the mistakes that people have made in their career, you can learn from it and not repeat them, and sort of scale faster. That's the hope. That's why we're here today. We have before this we had two other events. We talked about how products are built at unicorns. What do unicorns look like when they think about hiring? Uh, and continuing on that path, today we're discussing how to build careers in product management. It takes a few years to keep growing up the ladder, and depending on the on hey Asad, depending on the size of the org, depending on your what types of products excite you, whether it's scale, whether it's 0 to 1, whether it's 1 to 10. There are different career paths and different things that you can do to grow in those. So we actually have a really solid panel today. People at all levels of scale in the company, as well as their own kind of journey. They've done a multitude of things, everything from being a founder to being very early in teams and products that have gone on to become unicorns, and now at companies that are on their way to becoming decacorns. So very different scale. Also building products that are not just India specific, but building products for the world. So that's another skill set as you kind of think about building your PM career. So without much ado, I'll start with a few introductions. I'll start by first introducing myself. My name is Mona. I'm the founder at Appraised. At Appraised, our mission is to help people scale in their product management careers. Everything from people that want to firstly break into product management or are feeling stuck in their product management career at a APM or a PM level, want that little push to kind of get that step function change to go to the next level. That's what we focus on, and this is why product management is an extremely topic that we care a lot about. We spend a lot of time thinking about it. We spend a lot of time learning from folks in the industry, and this is our way of also learning. So as much as you are learning, we are also learning. So I'm really excited about this panel. So today we have, we'll start with Malti. She has been a product leader for at many interesting companies. Currently, she's head of product management at PayPal. She's also a very active startup mentor and actively contributes to the community. And so I'm really excited to learn from her. I feel mentorship has a lot of value to provide, and it's amazing when folks that are so busy in their time in their day-to-day life are able to kind of contribute back to the community. So lots to talk about with Malti on that. Next we have Pallavi. Pallavi has also very interesting career, many different verticals. So she was very early at MPL. Before that she was at Pocket Gems. And now she's at Epify. So from gaming to fintech, very early stage companies that have then scaled and become unicorns. So very excited to hear from Pallavi as well about her journey. Next, we have Vikrama. I think Vikrama has had several years of product management experience. I am part of a few startup groups where he is also part. He's also part of. Very active participant, has a very deep thought process around product, working with engineers, design, scaling products. So while I get a chance to learn from him on a daily basis on these startup groups, I wanted to have a platform where you guys can also kind of get to learn from his journey. So super excited to have you, Vikram. Asad Asad also has a very interesting kind of PM journey so far. He's worked at, as people, he's been early at a lot of companies, and I think 3 of 3 have been unicorns. So He started at, he's been at Swiggy, he's been at Gojek, and now he's at Coinbase. What is very interesting is, not only I think at Coinbase, I'm really interested to learn about his experience at Coinbase, not only because it's in the crypto space, but being a product manager in the crypto spaces, I think requires a completely different skill set than at least what I know or learn, so I'm excited to learn about that. And then last but not least, we have Deepak. Deepak has also had a very stellar PM career. He's been at Flipkart. He's now at Unacademy. He's also written a book on Amazon's bestseller on Tech Simplified. And whether you like to believe it or not, but the most common question, the biggest, I'd say, if you put up a Pareto principle, 80% of questions we get from aspiring PMs are how much tech do I need to know to become a PM, right? Like that is, I don't know how to code. Can I be a PM? I don't know. I've never written, a line of code. What can I do? So tech is a very important kind of, at least in people's mind, it feels like a mountain to climb before they can see any horizon about product management. I think there's a reason why it's an Amazon bestseller, because I think it's one of the very core topics that people kind of get stuck in their careers about, on how to think about tech and scale in tech. So super excited to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining in. We'll try to keep the conversation extremely interactive, and most of what we're going to do today is learn from the experience and sort of the learnings that folks on the panel have had, and you can kind of try to apply it in your own context and see if that's valuable for you or not. We'll hold off our questions until you can start typing your questions in the chat box, but we'll answer them at the end. We'll have about 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. So all right, let's get started. I'll start with, I'm a woman, and the first question I have, and it's super amazing that we have two women on this panel. I want to kind of talk a little bit about your career journey as a PM, growing into leadership roles, right? There are, in the past 3 to 4 years, product management has become more prevalent in India. There are people, first, product management was sort of a combination of program, slightly product. But now, because also the companies that are created in India are actually product first companies and not service first companies, people are getting to build really high quality product, right? I've seen that, at least for me, I've witnessed this transition in the last 4 to 5 years, where there are lots of product first thoughts in whether it's logistics, whether it is e-commerce, whether it is gaming. It's very product first. And so, as you guys have built your careers, what are some things you've learned? And especially for folks that are, both Pallavi and Malti, are there any, lessons or learnings you've had that you'd like to share, insights on being a female and growing a career into a leadership role? We constantly find that there are fewer and fewer women that get to the leadership part. So any insights on how can you get there? So maybe Malti will start with you, and then folks can chime in.
Yeah, thank you, Mona, for first of all having me here and for the kind introduction. So happy to be here. So I definitely, when I started my career, I was definitely an accidental PM. Not really. I think I was a project manager and I transitioned, and I think for the longest time people used to ask me, always confuse a project manager and a product manager. So I definitely echo with what you just said. So having said that, I think my own journey in terms of growing up as a product manager and going through the nuances, it has definitely not been a linear trajectory. And I think one thing which has always kept it very interesting is trying to be the product manager for different kind of products. Like I have kind of navigated purely enterprise product space, then I went into platform, then I moved to pure consumer product space, and the last few years I'm doing more platform products, right? So I think the diversity of the kind of products that I have done has kept it very, very interesting. And there is every single day, there is a different problem to solve. There is a different challenge to look forward to. So I think that has kept it very, very interesting. Having said that there has been a diversity and a different kind of a product, I would say the principles that we apply is, the first principle of making sure that we deeply understand the problem statement, for our customers before we kind of jump into the solutioning mode. We kind of understand the market, our customers, our domain like nobody else does. Making sure that we are designing the product, not thinking of only short term or a smaller set of cohort, but kind of thinking it, keeping the target addressable market in mind, has kind of been some of the very foundational principles which I have kind of time and again followed and constantly, consciously put in those efforts when we are discussing with our engineering, when we are discussing with, so that has been very, very helpful. The other thing I would say is that, while I navigated my journey across various products, I think being a woman, thankfully, in my own journey, I think I have never had challenges. In fact, I have had some fantastic women leaders in my own career who kind of helped me, lift as they rise, kind of a thing. And I think that was also one of the things which I learned from them, not only from my female leaders, but also from my main leaders who have been very, very strong allies, is that it is okay to ask for help. It is okay to, raise your voice. So those are some of the very common things which, and ask for mentors, look for mentors. So I have been really blessed to have a lot of different kind of mentors. And as you kind of called out, I'm somebody who really derive my energies just looking at, observing what different kind of peoples are doing, right? So I have read, for example, Deepak's book, and it is so fantastic, and it brings in a lot of his own experiences, perspective. So product management is a very, behavioral aspect. There are a lot of softer aspects here because we are trying to solve for a real problem that exists, right? So there is a lot of different ways of solving it, but what is the simplest and the fast, a good way of solving that is something that we continue to build on that craft. So I would say just following these first principles things, continuing to thrive in the problem statement, continuing to remain curious, and continues to stay relevant in terms of, reading. That those has been some of the very driving factors. And yes, to a longest of time that was possible, I remained an IC in my role. While I loved talking to people, I loved mentoring my juniors or other peer fellow product managers. But I think one thing which I really loved was as much as being hands-on. So that was something which gave me a lot of joy, wherein I could actually play around with that data. I could play around with the feature. I could work with the designer to figure out, okay, what is the best way we can build the prototypes and stuff like that. But yes, over the last, I would say 5 to 6 years, the focus has been how do I build my teams? How do I, especially I have done a lot of global products. So one of the key things which I try to solve for is that how do we have empowerment for the teams despite having different locations? There is a good amount of visibility, there is a good amount of customer empathy, even though your customers are sitting 10,000 miles away from you. So those have been some of the very key focus areas that I have tried to enable and empower my teams with.
Nice. Vikrama, any thoughts on this?
I think when I'm accidental product manager, I've talked about it, that I became a product manager. I thought I applied to a role which was project manager, but it accidentally was product manager. And so that's how I became a product manager. And this was also way back in 2008. When nobody really knew about product companies, forget about product management. And Flipkart was this small company in Bangalore, which was trying, and if you did a search on LinkedIn, the only product managers you found were at places like Rediff and India.com and so on. And the roles would be like, total of 8 or 9 roles in India or something like that. Yahoo used to have a good practice back then. So I didn't have any role models. I didn't have a career journey that I aspired to do. 2009 when I joined Directa, and that was also quite an accident because I used to be active in the Agile community in India, and Naresh Jain, who still heads the Agile software community of India, he referred me to Direct Eye, and in all my naivety, I wrote to Bhavin directly on LinkedIn, and he was kind. Like, he connected me to the only other person in the whole company who was doing product management at that time, and that's how I. And 2009, I joined Direct Eye in Mumbai. That was my very first time where I really got exposed to what product management is, what a big company is, and we were only 2 product managers back then in the whole organization. And I still remember one anecdote where the engineer who was taking my interview thought it's a software engineer interview because nobody interviewed product managers, and I was like, damn, like, this is a really tough software engineering interview. Like, what are they doing? And from there to where we are now. But one thing is still constant. The journey is still very personal to you because each organization is structured very differently. So product management in one, so something which looks like a very senior title in one organization is actually a very junior title in another organization. And therefore, if you're looking for a graph which you can carry from one place to another in a formal way, you don't have. So therefore, you have to rely on more informal things. Therefore, you have to dig one level deeper to see what does senior mean? What does leadership mean? A lot of times I get LinkedIn emails which are product leadership role, and they're like 2 to 4 years of experience. And now that I have been around, I can see that, you then need to go and see what type of an organization it is, what type of a company it is, what stage it is, and their leadership can mean very different things. One thing which is very important is we have all been conditioned, not just in product, but elsewhere too, to think of leadership as managing other people. And the more the number of people that you're managing is how senior you become. To an extent, that is correct as well. But the number of people who will be able to manage a lot of product managers in any given organization will be 1 or 2. Even in a very large organization, unless you become like a chief product officer or a SVP in an organization like Gojek or others, you won't have 30, 40, 50 people reporting to you. So that heuristic of managing others doesn't really work. What works is what is the impact you are having, what is the kind of products that you're getting to work, what is the kind of projects that you're getting to work. What kind of people are you getting to work, and are those products really central to the growth story of your organization, and are they the most challenging places in which you get to work? So if you are the product manager which your organization or startup community thinks can take on the toughest products and toughest projects and can get them executed, that, in my view, is what senior in product management really means.
Yes, I definitely agree with the sentiment of, I think the manager of the product manager is, people take that as a very quantitative value. Actually, it's more qualitative than quantitative. It's not about how many people you manage, it's about how many people use your product. That's how I like to, talk about people. When product managers come to Appraise, one of the things that we talk about is the way to measure whether you're making progress in your product management career is, are you building products that more people are using, right? Then you're kind of getting more and more senior in your roles. You're trying to build something which is larger scale, more for larger user segments. You understand a larger target audience. That's how you're going to grow in your product management career. Very good point. But yeah, people get obsessed about, oh, I need a team of 20 people, and I like, just by the nature of product management, the ratio is like 1:10 in engineers, right? Like, so the eng has to kind of grow 10x for you to have one other product manager with you, right? So just like, even in large organizations, you will not find teams which are like one person managing 10 product managers. It just rarely happens. Cool. Pallavi, thoughts?
Hey, hi guys. So my journey was quite different, I think, from Malti and Vikram's journey here. So I was very intentional about getting into product management, and I'd spent 4 years in consulting before transitioning. And I used sort of my business school time to see if product is a good fit for me, and kind of then went on and made a decision. My journey started with an internship, and interestingly, Mona, my very first product mentor was a woman. And I think somewhere subconsciously, it wasn't like an active part of decision making, but because I'd seen her manage large teams, I'd seen her lead, large initiatives, I'd seen her being respected and really looked up to at the company. Like that, I think unconsciously sort of led to my decision of going back to the company. So that was like a great initiation into a space where there's not as many women, especially in gaming, I think, which tends to be more kind of male heavy. So, but super interesting. I think gaming was like a very good initiation into product also, because learned really how to think about a user journey very, very carefully. And there's so much data actually in the gaming space. I think really understood how to look at data and make data-driven decisions and all of that. But interestingly, my transition after that was into the startup space, where there is literally no data. A lot of times, it's all 0 to 1 products where I try to fall back on my data-driven frameworks, but then there's no data, and making decisions, seems really, really challenging. But I think there's a few things that sort of carried me through these different sectors, through different kinds of stages of companies and so on. So one thing was, I think one big learning was, always, especially like, I think I still consider myself as being early in the career trajectory of a PM. And when you're trying to sort of index on learning, it's a very important decision that you should make very consciously is like, where do you want to work? What kind of people do you want to work with? And what kind of culture do you want to work with? And those elements sounds very obvious when I say it, but I don't think we are very, very conscious when we make decisions to join certain companies or startups and so on, right? So I think that to me retrospectively has been like a very big learning, because once you're almost set up for success when you're with the right people and you're in the right culture, right? So I think definitely think through that. Surround yourself with really smart people who you think are actually 5x, 10x better than you, because that's the way you can. Product is so broad. There's B2C, there's B2C, there's startups, there's large companies, there's all kinds of industries. There's fintech, there's gaming, there's entertainment, there's all kinds of things. But you can actually anchor on learning from people who are kind of ahead of you in that journey, right? So I think that's really helped me. Would like to call out, for example, even at FI right now, I'm a novice when it comes to fintech, right? But it's been great to really see both business minds as well as kind of the product minds there, who've had like years of experience in traditional banking as well as kind of new age technology. And that's something that's helped me grow faster as well. So I think the first one is think carefully about the people and the culture, and surround yourself with people who you think are 5x, 10x better than you. And the second thing I think that's carried me through different positions, I would say, in product is there's two things that I think we'll always need. So one is prioritization. No matter like what level you are at, I think the scope of prioritization changes quite a bit as you go up. But prioritization and decision-making frameworks, I think as much as possible from an early stage, try and observe your leaders, try and observe what situations are challenging for you, where are you struggling with decision-making, and pick from these smart people around you, right? I think that's also helped me a lot in sort of transitioning across companies and verticals. So I would say those are like the two things I would say keep an eye out for and be intentional about them.
Yes, prioritization is the name of the game in product management. I would say everything can go right and everything can go wrong if you don't get that right. Is my takeaway from 10 years of product management, I think. Deepak, thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Mona, for inviting me. I feel underqualified, by the way. I just want to be an audience and listen to what Vikram, Malti, and Pallavi are saying.
All of us are reading your books, Deepak. You're not underqualified.
No, I really admire like the people here, right? Like Pallavi and Asad are from my college. So I know them from there, and Vikram, I think I follow on Twitter, and Malti has been very kind to kind of help me with few things, right? So, but anyway, like I think almost all of the things that I was thinking have already been covered. So I'll just go with one thing, right, that has helped me really in my career, which is filling the gaps, right? So I think Vikram covered this shortly, but I'll just emphasize on that. My career has always been filling the gaps, like barring the first job that I did in consulting. In housing.com, I joined as a business analyst, and then I realized that there's a big gap. That is back in 2014 when PMs were not great with data. So I just built the product analytics team there. That was the gap that I saw. I built the research team there because I saw that people are not going after usability testing. And like I was reading this book by Steve Crook, Don't Make Me Think. It's a terrific book, by the way, for early PMs, right? Uh, if you go beyond that, like mostly like I joined Upgrad as first PM. So it was all about filling gaps. First building the platform, second building the community, third building the growth. And we took Upgrad from $0 to $20 million in ARR, at least in the first 3 years I was there. It was all about filling the gaps, like whatever was needed, just get it done, right? Same for MX Player. MX Player, I actually joined in the product team, ended up becoming head of growth because we wanted to grow and again raise the next round of funding like everybody else, right? So I think people often like in Flipkart in my interview, one of the things that my hiring manager Arindam asked me was like, why did you move from product to growth? And I was like, that was just a need. Like, I don't think there's a very conventional role as a PM that exists in the industry. And yeah, that has been the case, by the way. Like, and I would say, like, as PMs, like Vikram said, every role is different because every org has different gaps to fill. And your impact will always be measured by the gaps that you fill in that organization. The moment you start defining that, all this people management or like this, that, everything flies out of the window. And you are actually focused on making things happen that can benefit the users and the organization. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Awesome. I think one of the things that I had learned from my mentor was if you are in any new org and you want to make yourself, part of that org, the fastest way to do that is in the first 90 days, pick something that is a gap and just solve that. Pretty much you can build trust amongst the entire team very, very quickly. Like everybody will appreciate that you took the initiative and you got it done. Fastest way to kind of establish yourself in a new team.
And if you look at the product managers in India, I think the gaps that I identified was, of course, tech, right? Like 70-80% of PMs come from non-tech background. So
yes. Although I will say that in the last year and a half, that seems to have shifted a little bit because of the awareness about product management. A lot of the engineers who are don't see themselves kind of excelling in software engineering or building a career for like 10, 15, 20 years feel like they have an advantage because they have a tech background and a tech foundation to kind of move to product. So yes, but 100% agree with you. The most commonly asked questions on our FAQ when people ask, am I a good fit for product management, is I don't have a tech background. Do you think I can transition into product? Right. So that is definitely a gap that everybody both acknowledges and feels they need to fill to be able to transition. Asad, you have thoughts on this?
Hey, thanks, Mona, for this. I think it's pretty great learning to hear from everyone about their journeys. And I kind of like have worked like closely with Vikram at Gojek, and I know Deepak from my college days. So have also received a lot of mentorship from both of them. So I think I would say like my career journey, like I was a PM like who wanted to be a PM because like back then I was working in PureFit for very early days at PureFit, and I saw like Mukesh Bansal and Ankit Nagwari. Like these guys only do all their things with the PMs, right? And I thought it's a pretty cool job, something that you should be in, right? So from that perspective, I got a role at Swiggy, which was kind of a semi PM, and I had to do API management. And back then, the definition of PM was, hey, you were building something for the consumer, or you're building something great for the business. APIs were like not a very big great thing over there. I think over the period of time, what I learned in my career is ki as a PM, if you are that guy who can raise up the hand and say ki, hey, I can get this thing done, and be that guy who can do things at different stages, that is where it gives you acceleration, and that gives you an ownership mindset as well. So I think like from Swiggy, like I just maneuvered my way from building an API product. Although like currently API product management is on the rise and a lot of companies look for that skill set, but not at that point in time. And then built discounting at Swiggy, which was like a cream of a consumer product to build. Like after the other thing in terms of the career journey has been like as much as you learn on the job, like by doing stuff yourself, you have an equal chance to learn from your peers. And that is like something that really was accelerated at Swiggy. Like if you are able to learn from the products that your peers build, that gives you a lot of coverage and you tend to understand things at a much wider scale. And because of this, like I joined Gojek as an advertising PM, and I did not know advertising, but I had learned it like because it was built at Swiggy, right? So at Gojek again, like 2 years building advertising, uh, and post like after 2 years, I kind of realized, ki, hey, look, if there is something in product management, like I was kind of getting more comfortable in the ways of the food delivery companies of the world, right? 3 years at Swiggy, 2 years at Gojek. Then I thought, like, what is the next thing which is more challenging and which can position me for the next decade, right? And that is where like the thing about crypto was on the rise, and I figured out, ki, hey, Coinbase are opening up an office in India. So again, like went through that process, got into Coinbase. Again, Coinbase has been a place like where the learning has been of a very different nature. So I think like just giving some context about Web3 product management in there. So typically what you have in Web2 companies would be, ki, hey, I can make a product roadmap for 3 6 months, and more or less that planning is more consistent, right? If you have a good vision, you can build that vision in 6 months to an year and go about like doing the strategic slash tactical innovations time to time. But in Web3, the biggest problem here I realized was ki every 2 months the whole thing changes, the whole landscape changes. So what you think now is not valid after 2 months. So how do you stay ahead of the curve? So again, like in that, like the things that we learned, ki, hey, like you need to know the market in and out, and that market needs to be like, if you are 2 weeks away from Web3 knowledge, then you are just out of the game there. So that is one of the things that like the market research and knowing the market is a very huge focus for people at Coinbase, definitely. The second thing that I kind of learned in my career was ki, hey, like if you don't get good enough opportunities, how can you make those opportunities come to you within the organization itself? So I think like exploring, like currently Coinbase is like a Web3 company, but there are also lots of Web2 work, and India is a new team, and they will start with more of the regular stuff and not the cutting edge innovation. So I think the whole journey was ki, how do you figure out internally, how do you make sure that you write, or you basically get into the right forums to get to work on a cutting edge thing that you would want to work. So I think that is something that I kind of learned in Coinbase as well. Ki how do you work on more innovative stuff? But that has been the overall journey. I think like learn from peers, learn from mentors, and learn on your job, and keep on be the person, raise the hand, and that is the way to grow in your product management role. And I think when it comes to like what a product manager should do, and that is been already been covered.
Yeah. Actually, all of you guys have mentioned about how we should keep going, right? Like, how do you stay up to date? And this is actually a thing that I think is prevalent no matter where you are in your journey, right? You always have to upskill, you always have to stay updated. Uh, Share 2 to 3 tips of how you do that today. You already have a pretty intense work day. There is 500 conversations, threads. How do you stay updated? How do you upskill yourself? You know, uh, Maybe Vikram, you can start. You're pretty active in that space.
Uh, I think a part of it is who you are. And it's also a tough question because now, as you know, somebody who's nearing 40, you're slowing down, and your priorities in life start to change as well. But one thing which has consistently stayed, and I think Asad and Deepak and Pallavi and Malti all covered that, your network is very important. So the subtle ways in which your network, the 5 people, the 6 people that you surround yourself with, and the 50 and 60 that talk about things is very important. In 2016, this was at Zeta, there were so many people who used to read books, and they used to be active on Goodreads. And that is how I picked up my habit of reading books all over again after college, because after college, I hadn't really read books. And just being surrounded by people who are always talking books, who are always reading books, you just get inducted into it, even if you don't want. And my 2016, I set a target of reading only 25 books, but now I read 100 books every year. So and that just keeps going because it is the network. And also someone like, who comes from a background which is not very, you don't see people who are non-binary in the product community, in the tech community as well. So I used to be always shy about approaching anyone. And I used to be very hesitant, outside work, outside place, because you're always very, very conscious. That's how you're brought up. And then being around people who are very confident, who are very outgoing, who not like even think twice about reaching someone, giving someone a shout, reaching someone on LinkedIn or WhatsApp, that is something that I picked up in my career. And then I actively went out in cultivating communities. First, it was the Agile community, then now the startup community, and that has come up. I definitely feel that the network that you have, the people that you surround with is a moat. And if you're not actively cultivating that network, which is you're always going to be wondering, why am I not growing? Why am I not able to find time? How are these people? Do they have like 50 hours in their day? Like you'll always be like, thinking about this, because the things, it's not formal. You just pick small things. And now sometimes I don't know, but some of my team members will make a note on something I'll just consider very mundane and very run of the mill, and they'll just write a whole post about it, and they'll say, oh, we learned so much from this. And I'll be like, okay, I didn't even realize this was worth learning something from. But then it also works the other way around, where I am making notes and I'll send a note to people like, say, Mahesh on recruiting, like, he'll say something and I'll give him like a huge note. Hey, we had this conversation and I learned this from you. And this was really, really useful. So that network is, I think, the most important thing. And if you had to do one thing to supercharge your growth, to supercharge your learning, be very conscious about your input metrics. What signals are you getting? What conversations you're a part of? You can get into a ARP versus BJP conversation very easily. And you can also get into what do I need to upskill as well. And I'm not choosing sides. Like, both of those can be important, but you have to do it consciously rather than things coming to you unconsciously, especially in today's world where it's harder to filter that noise as well.
Absolutely. Other thoughts, guys?
I think Vikram has kind of covered, like all of it. And I just cannot this thing, because I think just talking to people, whether they are, from your circle of people with whom you work with daily. Because I remember when I moved from EMC to Intuit, we were a group of about 8 product managers, and out of that, 3 of them actually came from the startup world. And I had been always very cocooned and very comfortably, placed in some big enterprise organizations where I had worked. And I had no clue, right? I remember even in one of those conversations was the first time I heard about Uber, right? I said, oh, is there an app like that where you kind of get taxi on demand? And of course, as Vikram said, it is in the last few years, especially the plethora of information that gets thrown on you, whether it is the WhatsApp group that you are part of, the Slack channels that you are part of, and especially if you're somebody who's active on various platforms, you always have so much coming in your way. So you have to be consciously looking at what are the articles, where are you spending your time reading that 5-minute article versus, getting some head-on time reading some of those books from where you can gauge. So for me, I think a lot of those smaller nuances, which I have picked up, has been a lot implicit from the people that I have networked. And I would say there is a lot, I don't know how much I have been able to, for example, give to the startups whom I mentor. But in the last 6 years, after I got associated, let's say with NASCOM, or I was leading the accelerator program at Society Generale, those were my first steps, towards learning. For example, I never worked on AI/ML. The products that I was handling, I was never working on AI/ML. But then the first startup that came up, they said, okay, we will use AI/ML to basically build in that intelligence. I said, okay, let's do it. And by virtue of supporting them and figuring out how do we go about solving this problem is that when I started to get into those things, right? So I think you really need to seek out those opportunities, those forums where you think, you'll be thrown, sometimes you seek and sometimes you'll be actually be pushed that information which you can soak in. So for me, it has been just kind of imbibing a lot of things that have come my way, even in a lot of mentorship conversations, for examples that I have done. A lot of times, especially with a lot of young product managers, young engineers, it is just amazing to see the amount of knowledge or the set of tools. Probably I never used, for example, Calendly initially, right? And then I realized, okay, they said you can just block your time over there. So I think those are the nuances which have been very extremely helpful. So I'm hoping continue to stay, relevant. And yes, I would say there are times when we slow down depending upon what are we dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and probably on the age perspective also. But I think learning is something that, especially as a product manager, as a product leader, that should never cease to stop.
Deepak, you had something to say.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think I've just built on what Vikram and Malti already said, right? I actually, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but I have a habit of putting frameworks around things. It just helps my dumb brain to kind of remember those. But a couple of things, right? So one is, I think I stumbled upon this book called On Writing by Stephen King. He's a great writer, right? And he wrote this book. The only nonfiction book that he wrote was on writing, which is part his story and part like how to write. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is the toolbox approach to writing, where he says that the grammar and this vocabulary and all of these are tools that you need, and you don't know when you're going to use that. But elements of style, for example, is another tool. It really helped me in writing, at least, but it also helped me in product management, because when you take a toolbox approach and you think of like different tools that a PM needs to use, to different extent, by the way, like you don't want to be a designer, you want to understand, you need to build an eye for design. You don't need to be a coder, you need to understand how tech works and why that will be challenging. Same for writing. You don't want to be a writer, but you have to write very, very good specs and all, right? So I think the moment you apply that toolbox approach to your product management career, I think it will become very easy to detect the problems or the gaps that you have. For example, the reason I moved to MX Player from Upgrad was because in Upgrad, I had seen the revenue scale, but I had never seen user scale before in my life. Like I was working in housing and then Upgrad. But MX Player had 50 million daily active users. So I was like, why not? Like that's possibly the best company that can give me that chance to kind of see growth at scale, right? And same for, I think, Flipkart. It was very easy to choose for me the Flipkart voice search and assistant products, because possibly like the biggest thing that you need to build an AI/ML product, especially like voice search and advanced assistant, is by working in bigger companies like Flipkart and Amazon and all, because other companies either don't have data or don't have the required manpower to build those products. So the toolbox approach is very, very useful, like both, at least in the early stages of your career. And the second thing to that is basically, like Vikram covered this shortly, Malti also said it, be conscious of what you read. So over time, I think I used to read a lot of self-help books in college. didn't help. Then I started reading all the pop psychology books, didn't help. It was not until I stumbled upon this lecture by Charlie Munger, who talks about mental models and all, that I realized that you have to be conscious of the quality of people that you are listening from. And today my filter, I can tell you my today's filter, it could be different tomorrow, but today my filter is people who are operators. I would love to listen from them. Then people who are not operators, who are just writers, or who are just like analyzing something and summarizing something. And that kind of creates a very big difference. Like if you listen to what Andy Grove wrote, he just wrote one book that is more impactful than any of the product management books that I've read, right? I just read like Amp It Up by Frank Slootman. It's one of the best books that is written by like a CEO. So, and same for Twitter, by the way, just follow the operators. It becomes very noisy. Even like, and that's possibly one of my problems with operators going to full-time writers or creators, right? Which is you lose the source of the content. And then what am I following you for? Like you're just repurposing something or you're doing something else. So be very conscious of who you follow, who you listen to. And the reason I'm stressing this by taking one extra minute is because in the early stages of your career, I think there are a lot of YouTube channels, there are a lot of places where you'll get advice from. Most of it is unsolicited advice. Like if you get advice from Vikram, Malti, Pallavi, or Asad, great, or Mona for that matter, right? Mona has seen both India and US. I think our ecosystem is still very, very immature, but US ecosystem is very different. So if you like, be very conscious of who you are getting advice from, because in PM, especially, like the measure of quality of content and quality of advice is very hard to get. You'll find that in software development, you know the quality of code, you know the quality of design, you know the quality of everything. But in PMing, like you have to be very, very conscious about like what you're picking, or you'll learn things which you'll have to unlearn some way or other, like hard way or something. Yeah. So that's more or less.
Yes, I think PM is one of those vague roles that both are hard to hire, hard to figure out whether you're effective or ineffective. It takes a while before you figure out. But the downside is very large because you're kind of the nucleus that has an impact over maybe 10 engineers and 2 or 3 designers. And then by the time before you realize the problem is way deeper than you know, which is why, I think it's been very interesting to see the PM interview process as well as the skills that at least in Silicon Valley people appreciate versus skills that a lot of the tech companies in India appreciate. And for me, it is somewhat of a stark difference because having maybe I'd say probably one of the best product teams at Airbnb to like now seeing some of the startups kind of hire product talent. There is an overlap, but the overlap isn't as large as I thought it would be or it should be. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Product management is just a way of problem solving. You can have 20 solutions. Each of those solutions can be valid if you just change one constraint or one context. So being able to measure the trade-off and know what solution is right at what time in your given context is probably the skill you want to develop rather than and I think, as Deepak said, you get a lot of this from people that have actually gone to the nuances, because it is actually the devil is in the details. Like, you can't start writing an effective PRD by just looking at 10 templates and say, I'm going to pick one. You actually, great PRDs get created after many ways of writing PRD where have gaps, that are brought to notice by engineers, by designers, by edge cases, by actually getting something out and then realizing, oh shit, you completely forgot this one edge case you hadn't really thought about. So absolutely right. I think there's just a lot of noise around product management. Finding that signal is actually as much art and an area that all of us need to upskill ourselves also constantly. It's like an ML in your own head, like train your data set with every time you see a signal that doesn't work for you. Pallavi, thoughts on this?
Hey, I think most of the folks covered the big ones here. I would just say one thing. I think like Vikram was absolutely right to point out that at the end of the day, you have to talk to people, you have to sort of jam with them, discuss ideas and learn new things from other people, because especially when you're working on areas that are pretty new, right? Or problems that are not solved for, this knowledge, I mean, frameworks can come from books and so on, of course, which is helpful. But I think at the end of the day, you really have to create time to talk to people. I think that's super important. But I would just add one thing. I think, for example, I'm not a very extroverted person. I'm very introverted. So it's a lot of effort for me to actually, make new connections and kind of talk to people. I do that, but I think not at the scale that a lot of other people do. But I would still add that there's a lot of other resources I think that we can take a lot more seriously. For example, most companies I think have PM team catch-ups, right? So it's just product teams sitting together and jamming. And especially people who are at large organizations, there's tons of products being built, right? I'm sure there's search, there's like Malti was saying, AI/ML related projects that are happening. There's something new happening on the acquisition and marketing front, and PMs are working cross verticals all the time. I think those are like small situations where if you're really like good active listeners and you ask the right questions, you actually stand to learn a lot from them. So these catch-ups, or even if your company is organizing hackathons, for example, right? Like create time for it on your calendar. Don't do it as a thing you're doing just on the, just alongside all your other work. Like I block 2 solid days for a hackathon, and I make sure that I'm actually sitting and thinking about super like different ideas and strategies on how to build the same products, right, at the company. So I would say this is like very low hanging fruit. But it's a great place to start, especially if you're not somebody who's immediately comfortable reaching out. And over time, you'll build that muscle as well.
Cool. Sorry, Asad, I think you were trying to say something and then Pallavi started.
No issues. I think I'm the learner over here, so much knowledge over here. So the thing is, you have to decide like what type of learning you would want to do, and that is in a sense of learning deep and learning wide. So the first step of the journey is how do you get to the deeper things that you would want to really go deep into, while there are so many things that, like, let's say you have 100 books, and how do you skim through that and get to those 5 books that you would want to read. I think one of the personal experiments that we did, like with a few PM friends of mine, was so we were like discussing at our friend's house, hey, we would want to like at least learn investing, and this is not product management. We would want to learn investing. There are so many things in investing, so we should learn investing and try to basically do those investments. So the whole thing was we created a WhatsApp group, and we said hey, it is not possible for one individual person to know everything about, let's say, US stock investing, or even in crypto there are big spaces like DeFi or NFT. One person cannot do that. So the whole point was we got 10-15 experts in the mutual group. Hey, one guy knows about NFT, the other guy knows about DeFi, and someone knows about, let's say, mutual funds, right? And now the whole point was these guys are experts, so these guys can give bite-sized content to you. Hey, they do their research and they say, hey, I think these are 5-10 good things. Now, when this happens, like everyone starts to contribute. So the model there is everyone learns from everyone, and you start to contribute. Hey, this is something that I feel good. Now you have more concentrated content that is available. Now, if you have interest in one of those topics, then you go ahead and do your deep research and do your investment. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I kind of learned. So in Coinbase, there is this huge problem: how much of crypto information is needed, and how do you get on top of that? So they have kind of created kind of a Slack group in which people post these really concentrated pieces of information. And once you see those information, if you like it, you go deep into it, and like you can then learn more out of it. So that is something that I found pretty interesting to share.
Nice. So you guys are all building products at companies that are growing aggressively. What are your top hiring practices that enable you to cut through the clutter and find the rock stars? Especially in product. Like I said, it's very difficult to know, and it takes very long to figure out an ineffective product manager, but has large impact, right? Because influences engineers, designers, a bunch of things. Pallavi, maybe you can start. You've been hiring aggressively at MPL, at FI.
Yeah, hiring's been a bit of a learning curve for me, as
Yes, share your learnings. That's what we're here for.
Very tough one. I think the first thing is really having internal alignment on who you want to hire, right? So just as an example, I think MPL was big on hiring specialists. So MPL would bring in a person with fantasy background to lead the fantasy gaming vertical. They would bring in somebody who's done, let's say, video streaming to do video streaming and things like that. Whereas, like what I do right now at FI is we hire generalists. It's actually two very, very different frameworks. But I think first is having that conversation internally, understanding what is it that who is it that we really want to hire and why. So, for example, generalists really help you with the philosophy could be that they really help you with pace, right? So you bring in one person quickly, start up one vertical, and then go ahead and just ramp up as quickly as possible, right? Whereas generalists could be attuned to a more long-term retention strategy, for example. So I think having that alignment on what kind of people do you want to hire, what kind of backgrounds, and especially what kind of culture, right? I think you have to have that like really big cultural alignment. I think especially again, I'd say culture again and again, but I think like with startups, I think it's very, very important. If you bring in people who fit into the culture, they'll do well, they'll do great. They're almost always set up for success that way. If not, then things break along the way, and it's not great for either party, right? So I think once you have that internal alignment, really having multiple people be part of a very standard process. So I'm a fan of having like super standard interviews, not really doing coffee chats. I think it works at a senior level when you're hiring like super senior folks with tons of background, but at least in the mid level, entry to mid level, I would say that having a super standard process really helps, because then it's not just you, it's like 5 other people judging the same candidate, right? And then once you have your brainstorms and you decide, okay, yes, go, no go on the candidate.
You judge them on?
It's a bit bias free that way. What do we judge them on? So I think there's a few different things that probably most companies would test for. So I think user empathy is a big one. So really understanding, is this person able to put themselves in the shoes of a user and think from their lens, right? This I think now is being adopted across companies. So I think it's become a pretty standard requirement. User empathy is the first one. Then you need some design sensibility, of course. Different kinds of people have different kinds of spikes. So maybe your spike is not design, it's something else. But I think that's something that I would definitely test for. Also something in startups, I think we do test for whether you're a little bit of a hustler, right? So for example, if you don't know design, will you be quick to pick up certain tools and quickly sort of learn and ramp up and execute on those? The user empathy, design, those are I think big ones that I test quite a bit. There's a little bit of technical kind of, it's not exactly like, do you know how to code or do you understand how to solve big, hairy tech problems? No, it's like, do you know how to communicate with engineers? Are you somebody who is good to collaborate with? And that's a conversation. So for example, those interviews are typically with an engineering manager, somebody who's in the engineering org, right? So are you able to brainstorm with this person and come to a concrete solution? And also, have you been mindful of products in the past and their technical intricacies? So you don't have to understand every little detail there, but like if something went wrong, did you know how to address that particular problem? And how do you, are there broader learnings on the tech trends or tech space that you've taken with you that might help you in your future role? So I think that's kind of the tech-ish aspect of the interview. And then there's a little bit of sort of general reasoning and logic, right? So that could come from case interviews, that could come from any kind of a product problem that you give people. It's just understanding what is your reasoning like. Are you able to take in all the information that's given to you? Are you able to put it into a structure? Are you able to follow through that structure and then eventually come at one or two solutions that we pick and prioritize against, right? So I think these are the big ones. There's project management and analytics also. I think that's kind of things that, but I think like most people, do well on those interviews. Like I think analytics, especially like if you go with an Indian audience, people are great at math and numbers and whatnot. So I think that usually is not the biggest ones that I test on. So then just going back, recapping, I think user empathy, some amount of design sensibility, a little bit of being somebody who the tech team can collaborate with. Like these are the key things that I would test for. and logical reasoning. I think these are ones, and I've seen both MPL and, for example, FAI tests along the same lines, though processes or the exact questions and interviews might be different.
Got it. Vikrama, what about you? I feel like Gojek has the most intense interview process.
Yeah, you can blame me because I am one of the co-authors of the interview process. So I think I've had one of the most rewarding careers because from 2005 till almost 2020, I started managing people when it was 2005, and I've been hiring people since then. But I've also been an IC throughout, so I've always had this one product which I worked with. And 2020 was when my team was also like, no, now it's done. Like you always hold the best engineers, you always get the best designer for your product. So you have to stop managing products, and you have to now get into full-time management to save. But that's also then you convert hiring as a product problem, and what are you looking for, and so on. And at Gojek, you are hiring at scale, and you're hiring in multiple geographies. So, and that was one of the goals that we wanted to do, because people would come back and say, oh no, this part you hire, this group hires really well, this group doesn't really hire well. And then when you are 1 year, 2 years later, when that person is looking to move internally, it used to be a challenge. So we wanted to create a system where whosoever gets in at Gojek first. That's the first key, which means you need to have certain skills which are mandatory. And
what are those skills?
Yeah, so number one is product strategy. And product strategy so we have levels at Gojek. So you can be hired at level 2, which is pretty much fresh out of college, or 1 or 2 years of software engineering experience, and then you've trying to move to product, or ops background and trying to move to product. So we don't look for extreme product strategy skills, but you should also not be raw. Like, you should not also be like, okay, you're not able to look at a tech product and not look at any elements of strategy. You're not able to come up with, okay, there are consumer segments, there are supplier segments, if you're not able to do that, then it is hard. You've not like developed that product instinct. But as you go up, you need to then have a lot more depth in terms of how are you going to win each of the segments, how are you going to prioritize, and what would that lead be. Second thing is product design. So Gojek, we have an extremely research-friendly, design-friendly culture. And if product managers don't bring a product design discipline, you will then be reliant on design. You'll not be an equal partner. Product management is a pairing exercise. You're pairing with strategy, you're pairing with design, you're pairing with data, you're pairing with engineering, you're pairing with marketeers. And you have to be an equal in every single relationship. You have to be learning, but you also have to be giving. That means you need to hone all the muscles over there. And product design is one muscle which carries you everywhere, because that is the voice of the customer, that is the needs, that is the pain points. Which pain points are you prioritizing? Which customer segments are you prioritizing? And so many product managers are not able to do that. For instance, if you'll just ask a simple question on Instagram, influencers versus regular people, you have a choice to make on whom to go after to prioritize tooling for. Most product managers stumble, like, okay, how do I think about this product? And the more senior you are, the more nuanced answer you are looking for.
Correct.
Data is, again, important element, and data and design then go together. First, we do these two rounds separately, but then bar raisers, which me, Deanne, Rob, who do these rounds, we look for bringing these things all together. Engineering for us is a knockoff round, but it's not a knock-in round. So if you do really well in engineering, but you don't do well in design and data, you won't get in. But if you don't do well in engineering, then it's a flag. And in engineering, different teams at Gojek will have different bars. So some teams, like, will work on, say, data engineering side of problems, or API side of problems, or marketplace side of problems. There you need real solid engineering skills. Otherwise, you'll not succeed. But then there are other teams where product design and data can carry you through, because that is where you'll do most of the work. There you should not be a rookie. It means you should not be someone who can't work with engineering. That is Then the other thing that we also emphasize really important is because we are a global team, you need to be able to work well across groups without biases. So my team, for instance, has a lot of women. Transport team is majority women product managers. This year, the promotions, majority of the people who are promoted were women.
That's
so
amazing.
if you are going to come with biases where you're going to use terms, and there are subtle biases which are coachable, like if you're using guys a lot, that's a little coachable. But if your examples are also like he is doing this and then he has to bring bread to his family and all that, then you start seeing. So then we bring out coaching that, okay, think of like what would the life be in the day of a woman who's a merchant but also has to take care of her kids. They were not able to come up across the breadth of diversity. That is a flag as well. And we've rejected candidates who've come back and asked questions and said, there were like 2 women who were taking the interview, and then the senior person interviewing, and this person was, am I going to be interviewed by someone else? Okay, what level of the organization you are at, and so on. And if you do that, you're automatic no. We will not really bring you in. And one of the reasons why this is so is because the product management process has been co-authored by me and Deanne. We both have seen through our career how hard it is for people who are at the fringes to succeed and grow up the level. So we wanted the process to be fair for them. And that also means we don't give you a take-home assignment, because it's unfair to people, especially working mothers. You don't have time. When will you go and work on that assignment for yourself? If you need that assignment, make them do it during the interview process. Don't make them do it outside. Somebody who's taking care of their elderly parents, when will they find that time to do that assignment for you? And if they're interviewing with 10 different places, how are they going to do those 10 assignments and land a good career? So data, design, and strategy are very, very important skills. And then engineering is a knockoff. And then it all has to tie back together. We place an equal emphasis on behavior as well as case. So you can't just be, okay, I'll explain you what my background is, my role is, but when you give me a rookie case, and the case will never be about Gojek, it will be always something B2C product. And if you're not able to solve case, then you don't. If you solve the case, but you don't do well in behavior, that leads to a lot of interesting debrief discussions, because you see raw intelligence, but you then see someone who's not yet had the ability to exhibit that intelligence in the setting. Depending on the level, we may take a chance on it.
Got it. Asad, what about you? I'm very interested to know what a product management interview in a crypto company looks like.
Okay, so I think the principles of judging a product manager is same, irrespective of they are in a crypto company or not in a crypto company. I think like Coinbase's interview process is like, as Vikrama said, like we kind of also look for those subtleties, like people don't have those biases. And one of the tips that I can give to people interviewing for let's say Silicon Valley companies would be, let's say if there is a blind person, so you need to be very empathetic the way you communicate that, right? Like for example, if there's a question, design Uber for a blind person, so you need to be saying not like blind, you would say words like, so he's visually impaired. So you have to show that deep level of empathy for the user. That becomes very, very important. Now, on terms of the interview process, I think most of it is related to product strategy, product sense, and the design thing. Now, one of the things that Coinbase will start to do recently, and this is going to be a big change, especially for crypto companies going forward, and we have seen these changes. So we also want to know how crypto forward you are, and there will be like questions or interviews related to that. Now, the reason why this is being put into place, crypto, unlike any other thing, is a game of knowing the market. Like if you are not very excited about this industry, and if you don't have a lot of knowledge, not passion to learn about the market, then it becomes a challenge, right? Like, because if you don't do your market research, then you are just out of the game. So one of the things that Coinbase will be trying on is making sure at least you show some passion or show some learnability about any crypto ideas. Like we can ask you, ki, hey, can you tell us about NFT? Like, can you tell us about an app on crypto? How would you improve that? Those sort of things. But primarily, it's all about like the basic product management principles which are being tested, your ability to work with different stakeholders, and your ownership level. Absolutely.
Got it. Got it. Deepak, what about you?
Yeah, again, like mostly what Vikram, Pallavi, and us has already covered. Few things that matter to me, maybe I'm biased, but uh, apart from the like hard skills and behavioral thing, like the story of the person, I have a soft corner for people who have struggled in life, because I think if I say like PM career is a continuous struggle, it won't be an understatement, right? Like if you want to really do a good PMing. So one is the story, like what have you done? Show it to me, right? And uh, I think you'll make two very interesting things that happen in the story sort of discussion is there is an instant connections most of the times, right? And the story tells more about people's behavior than and their psychology than like anything else. Like they might have a very good answer for a question around what did you do when this happened and what did you do when that happened, but your life story does not lie. Like usually, like if you can see people who externalize the problems, which is like this happened because of this happened because of that. And as a PM, in my mind, that's a lethal problem because you can't externalize a problem. There will always, I think, smartest PMs have best excuses, by the way. Like smartest people, actually, not PMs. But and that needs to be kind of anchored rightly to be a great PM, right? Like, so the story actually matters a lot in at least my teams, and then self-awareness levels, right? How aware, I think I would still hire a person who is low on skills but highly self-aware, right? Because that's a mark of how much progress they're going to make in next year or next year and all that, right? And if you club the self-awareness levels of, this is especially important in leaders, by the way, like not the junior folks, but in leaders, I think if they're not self-aware, that leads to bigger problems because as Vikram said, right, like you are managing managers, right? Which means that your span of influence is so high that anything that you do can kind of create a big problem for the org. So if you are not self-aware, if you don't know what your weaknesses are, especially what your weaknesses are, you might underestimate or overestimate certain problems. And that can create a big issue. Like you should know when to ask for help from your EM. You should know when to, like, I don't have a very strong like project management sense, right? And like it has to do with whatever I've learned so far in my career. But that means that I'll seek help wherever needed. Uh, so yeah, that's like more or less like self-awareness and story is very important. In fact, like for the PM aspirants here, like build your story, like understand what makes you you. And I think you'll stand out as a PM. It will also help you identify where you need to go. And even in some cases, I've seen that people have taken their decisions whether they should be a PM or not based on like how their story has been and based on their self-awareness levels. So yeah, that's
Awesome. Deepak, one of the questions we have is the books you mentioned. If you can drop us a note, we'll send a message to everyone with the list of books you have, and the rest of you guys also. If you think any books are specifically relevant to people early in their careers that largely influenced you or you found that extremely insightful, please share. We'll share it with we'll send an email to everyone that's joined in today. There's one question I think Joel asked, which is how do you change the mindset of cracking the PM interview to actually cracking the PM job? Like, what skills or tools do you get better at? How do you transition from cracking the PM interview to cracking a PM job mindset?
see, actually, both are interrelated. I'll just say one point here, right? I think the hardest round to clear is product sense. And it is also the hardest skill to build. Like rest, like data and all, I have seen people like amping up, but product sense is where you actually graduate to be a strong PM. So even in your preparation, if you start focusing on the product sense, if you start, and it will not come in a day or in a month, I think you can still crack the interview, but unless you have a great product sense, you'll not gain the respect of fellow PMs or fellow engineers or designers. That is where you add a lot of value. And it is a culmination of almost everything that we hold true to our hearts as a PM, like user empathy, user research, market knowledge, and a lot of other things. This is where you shine actually. Like this is the epitome of decision making as a PM. So that's one thing that's possibly like it's a single North Star metric that I would put. But to know where you're good at that or not, you'll have to pick somebody like Vikram or Malti or Pallavi or Arsad and actually talk to them, understand how good is your product sense. And then possibly like you can see the gaps.
I absolutely agree. Product sense is extremely important. Actually, one of the things at Appraised, one of the first things we built at Appraised was this thing called Know Yourself test. And the idea is just put yourself in the situation of solving different problem statements to know what are your areas of strengths and what are your area of blind spots, right? And it's like, a lot of people also feel the sense of judgment when they try to solve it with somebody. They try to make up answers that are probably not naturally coming to them, or they just kind of in this judgment-free zone. It is difficult to truly be yourself. So we made this like a self-serve test. You just go online, download the app, just take the test and see where you are. And the one of the things that is part of the test is actually product sensibility, which is do you get product intuitively, or are you and if you don't, then I think one of the questions is how do you build product sense. Actually, in my opinion, one of the very easy ways to build product sense is just constantly be observant about different products, and that observation to get more and more nuanced. So one of the things that we do in the 16-week career accelerator plan that we have is every day anybody that is part of the plan posts a product observation. It can be a small feature, it can be a notification, it can be the language, it can be the flow, it can be the user segment, it can be the smallest things. And the more nuanced your understanding of observations gets, the faster you learn, and that's how you kind of develop this product sensibility. And you don't have to be part of career accelerator plan. You can actually just every day just wake up and whatever's your favorite app, just see what has changed, get better at it. I think if you do more and more of that, you start to build that product sensibility. There are a few other questions, but I think general thought on the questions are, if you're very early in your PM career, is it better to join an early stage startup, or is it better to join a larger company? This is also one of the more common questions we get asked at Appraise. Your thoughts, guys. All of you guys have started in smaller companies, have also been part of large companies. You guys are also hiring fresh talent. Where do you see people learning the most? We'll have one additional question. We are just way over time, but this is so interesting. I actually don't want to end the conversation. But we'll try to have another session like this. But this is, I think, very common, very important question. Actually, people tend to struggle with both. So we'd love to get people's perspective.
I think the way to look at it would be for product managers, for product designers, for engineers. It's very easy to showcase the skills. You have GitHub, you have Dribble. It's very easy to show that. What do product managers show? Product managers essentially show the company and the product that you work with. So if you are getting an organization which is well known, it is easy. And that's why when we were hiring at Gojek, one of the problems we had to solve in India was how do you make Gojek attractive when nobody uses the product? So that became the problem. So if you are getting the chance to work on a product and a company which is well known, choose that. If it is second is if you're not getting that, it can be like a B2B product or an API product. Is it well known and respected in the community? That is the second heuristic that at least I choose. The third thing is now if it is very early stage and you don't have these signals, then I look for talent density, which is who's the CTO, who's the co-founder, who's the founder. That gives you an indication of what are the likelihood of this organization succeeding? But even if it doesn't succeed, will it be a good place to learn and grow your network. So those will be the three things I will say. If you can join an MNC, some people say you join an MNC and not be really successful. I see so many pings from people at Google, at Microsoft, who are like pinging, we are stuck in our career here. Please save us. Please take us somewhere. And I also see in startups where the startup you've joined really with a lot of fanfare and it just folds up in 1 year, or there's a layoff and so on. So you need to look at a little longer term rather than that specific job, because that job leads to something in a 10-year horizon, in a 15-year horizon. One question which I think is similar, which was asked, is should you leave a job which is not working? You absolutely should. Don't. If you have a string of jobs which are 6 months, 7 months, then it's a problem. But one off job which you leave in 6 months, 7 months because it's not working out, get out if it is not working out and get something which is something that will work. It's no longer 2005 where you have to retire with the job or you need a 5-year on the job. When you will find it, you will see. 2013 to 2017, I had 6 jobs. And from 2018, I have 1 job. So there's no indication that, because you had these periodic switches, you are going to not be a successful product manager. The important thing is be as selective as you can in choosing the heuristic, but you can go wrong even after that. So don't hold yourself to it. Find something that will work. But if you're periodically making wrong mistakes, then get a Malti or a Pallavi or a Deepak to, tell you, okay, what am I missing? Or join Mona's course so that, she can instill some sense in you before you get the product sense.
Thank you. There is one last question we're going to take, and then that'll be the end of the event. How does one know what kind of a PM one wants to be? And is it usually a function of what you've done before, or how can you have a litmus test around it? First thing I want to say is that even if you were one type of PM, it doesn't mean you can't be a different type of PM. So I don't like, it's not a do or die situation. It's not like you picked one. It's not like your college where you started your undergrad degree and you have to graduate with that degree 4 years later. You can transition. It is important to know what you are good at. I think the function should be what your strengths are, because then you'll naturally shine in that role. But transitions from one PM type to another are not extremely hard. So it's a type 2 decision where you can make mistakes and experiment and learn what you're good at. Sorry, Vikram, go ahead.
So look at the PM flywheel. You have focus, you have what do you want to be. That's one node of that flywheel. The other is your network, and the other is your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's each one of them is feeding into each other. One of the mistakes we do is we think that network's not important, focus is not important, or your experiences are not important. Everything is important, and everything is feeding into each other. When you're starting off, I go wrong with my focus so many times, and it is your network and your experience can lead you astray. So your network, people you look up to, can take you towards that. But focus without having the experience to work on that focus is also meaningless. Mm-hmm. So selecting the roles or outside activities which help you work on the focus is also very important. So figure that piece out, and you will want to be different things. I think Asad mentioned that you will want to be different things in different period of time. And once you'll become a kind of a product manager, you'll enjoy it for a while, but then you'll want to be some other kind of a product manager. So it's a continuous journey.
Yes.
I would just want to add one thing to the previous question. So, how do you kind of decide between a big company and a small company, as your first job? So one of the things that I have seen, 3 years back, it could have been a big company, right? Because you learn, first job, learning is the thing to optimize for. And in a big company, you learn on the product, you learn on the practices, and you learn from the peers. But right now what has happened is like there is lots of material, there's lots of access, there's lots of stuff about product management, for example Deepak's book. So you can really learn a lot and apply it on the job, and you get to do that in a small company. Like one of the things that I don't see the LinkedIn or the Twitter ecosystem for young product managers in India is, see, a lot of LinkedIn messages will come, ki, hey, I would want to get into product management, and that's fine. But I don't see a lot of these sort of problems coming in. Hey, I'm having a problem on this product. Can you help me? And that is something that I have not seen. Like if you tell a product manager, hey, I am facing a problem in this particular product, like 9 out of 10, everyone is going to help you, right? Because everyone would want to impart what they have learned. But like fortunately or unfortunately, the only messages that like LinkedIn or Twitter will have, hey, how do I break into product management? And that is absolutely important. But I think the second ecosystem also needs to develop. Like, tell us about the problems that you face, and we can definitely help you with the experiences that we have. Like we do that on a personal level for sure. But like if the ecosystem does that, that will be much more beneficial.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everyone. We are 30 minutes over time in a 1 hour event. I definitely enjoyed the conversation. I actually don't want to stop, but I know it's a Saturday afternoon. People have plans. Thank you so much. We'll have this recording on YouTube. You guys can watch it. As Vikram also mentioned, all the folks are on Twitter, on LinkedIn. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. In addition to that, if there are other questions, also reach out to us at contact@appraise.co. We'll try to answer them and get in touch with you. At least find the right person to answer that if we don't have the answers ourselves. Thank you so much. And we'll have more events upcoming. Stay tuned on our Twitter and LinkedIn channels. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.